The queen had once been the symbol of strength throughout the entire kingdom. Her people admired her. Some even feared her, not with hatred, but with the quiet respect reserved for those who carried true power. She walked with confidence, spoke with authority, and possessed a presence that could silence an entire hall without ever raising her voice. Her decisions had shaped the future of her kingdom for years. Her influence reached far beyond the palace walls, touching every village, every town, and every city under her rule. But everything changed after the accident. One single moment, one terrible event that turned her world upside down. The woman who had once moved like a force of nature was suddenly forced to fight battles no enemy army could create. Her body became weaker, her steps became slower. The strength she once took for granted began slipping away. She could no longer move through the palace halls with ease. She could no longer ride across the countryside on horseback or take part in the activities that had once brought her joy. Her condition forced her to become cautious, calculating every movement, hiding the pain behind a calm expression. The kingdom still saw their queen, still saw the leader who had guided them for years. But behind closed doors, she struggled with a fear she had never faced before. The fear of appearing weak. Because a ruler could survive enemies at the gates, but could she survive being seen as vulnerable? The palace, usually bustling with activity and full of advisors, visitors, and courtiers, felt emptier than it ever had. The queen had withdrawn into the private chambers, relying on her aides and attendants to handle the demands of the court. People came to see her out of duty rather than desire, presenting gifts, reports, and requests, but few stayed long enough to truly know her, and the queen preferred it that way. She didn't want sympathy, and she didn't want anyone to treat her as less than the ruler she had always been. Yet beneath the surface, she felt a quiet loneliness that no amount of power could erase. Nights were the hardest. She would sit by the window in her chamber, looking at the stars and thinking about what her life had become. Her heart longed for connection, for someone to see her as she truly was, not just as a queen or as a person with a disability. The accident had left not just physical marks, but emotional scars as well. She remembered the day vividly. It was supposed to be ordinary, a celebration in honor of her leadership, but a sudden fall had changed everything. The world had shifted, and with it her role in her own life. The people celebrated her resilience, speaking in awe of how she had adapted to her new circumstances. But admiration was not enough. It could not fill the emptiness she felt, nor could it replace the moments of fear and frustration she experienced every day. She had learned to hide her struggles, presenting strength even when her body ached and her mind wavered. She became cautious, careful in trusting anyone, and more determined than ever to protect her independence. Then one day, news arrived that a human soldier would be coming to her kingdom. He was not royalty, nor was he a noble or a wealthy landowner. He was someone who had earned his position through courage and service, a soldier known for his skill and unwavering dedication. The queen was immediately skeptical. Why would someone from another land want to come here to a kingdom ruled by a disabled queen? What did he hope to achieve? Her first thoughts were protective. She did not want her court disrupted by outsiders, and she certainly did not want to entertain the idea of companionship or emotional involvement with a stranger. But still, curiosity stirred within her. She had seen soldiers before, admired their bravery from a distance, but this human was different in ways she could not yet understand. When the soldier arrived, he carried himself with calm confidence. He did not make a show of strength or boast of his achievements. Instead, he approached the queen with respect, bowing low and speaking in a tone that was both sincere and humble. He introduced himself not as a conqueror or someone seeking favor, but simply as a protector and a visitor who wished to serve. The queen studied him carefully, observing the way he moved, the way he spoke, and the way he interacted with her attendants. There was no arrogance, no impatience, no hint that he saw her as weak or incapable. This, more than anything, captured her attention. Even though the queen had learned to guard her emotions, she could not help but feel a small spark of interest. It was not romantic, at least not yet, but there was something about the soldier's presence that made her feel alive again. He was patient when she asked questions, careful not to overstep boundaries, and surprisingly perceptive. He noticed when she struggled with a task, offering help without making her feel inferior. He listened more than he spoke, and his words, when he chose to use them, were thoughtful and meaningful. The Queen had long since grown weary of flattery and empty promises. For the first time in years, she felt seen in a way that mattered. Yet, despite this growing intrigue, the Queen's skepticism remained strong. She reminded herself of her reasons for keeping distance. She had been hurt before, both emotionally and physically, and she was not willing to let anyone close without proof of trustworthiness. She tested the soldier subtly, observing how he reacted under pressure, how he treated her attendants, and how he spoke about his homeland. Each test revealed patience, kindness, and a quiet strength. He did not seek approval or reward, only to do what was right and necessary. Slowly, the Queen began to feel the first signs of a connection that went beyond respect. Even in the quiet moments, when the palace was empty and the evening light spilled across her chambers, the Queen found herself thinking about the soldier. She wondered about his life, his experiences, and what had shaped him into the man he was. She imagined conversations with him that went beyond duty, moments where laughter could replace formality, and perhaps even a friendship that did not carry the weight of expectation. The thought frightened her as much as it intrigued her. She was not accustomed to allowing herself to feel, to hope, or to imagine a life where someone truly understood her. Yet the possibility existed quietly and insistently, like the soft glow of dawn before the sun fully rose. The Queen had always ruled with her mind and her will, but for the first time in years, her heart was quietly stirring. She could not deny the impact of the soldiers' presence, nor could she ignore the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she did not have to face her world alone. The palace walls, once so confining, began to feel less like barriers and more like a place where connection could grow, if only she dared to let it. And while she did not yet know how her story with the soldier would unfold, she sensed that this encounter, simple and unassuming as it seemed, might be the beginning of something entirely new, something that could change her life in ways she had never imagined. The Queen remained cautious despite the growing curiosity she felt about the soldier. She reminded herself every day that she could not afford to be careless. Her position required vigilance, and her recent experience with the accident had taught her that trust must be earned, not given freely. Still, the soldier's presence was difficult to ignore. Every time he entered the room, there was a calm confidence about him that made her feel a little lighter, even if she would never admit it aloud. She began testing him in small ways at first. She asked questions about his past, curious to see how he spoke about himself and what mattered to him. He answered honestly, without exaggeration or pride. She watched how he treated the palace staff, how he listened when they spoke, and how he moved through the corridors. He never acted as if he were better than anyone else, never demanded attention or respect because of his rank. The Queen had expected arrogance, perhaps even a hint of condescension, but there was none, only a steady, quiet respect that surprised her more than she cared to acknowledge. As the days passed, the Queen set more subtle challenges. She would ask him to perform tasks that required attention to detail, asking for his opinion on matters of logistics, strategy, or even the day-to-day running of the palace. She watched his reactions carefully. Did he grow frustrated when asked questions? Did he try to deceive or manipulate to make himself look better? Each time she found that the soldier remained patient, thoughtful, and honest. He did not try to impress her with words. He simply did his best and allowed his actions to speak for him. This earned him a measure of respect in her eyes, though she refused to admit it fully. The Queen also observed how the soldier interacted with people who had no power, people she rarely noticed herself. She saw him helping servants carry supplies without complaint, speaking gently to those who were anxious, and offering encouragement when someone struggled. These small acts told her more about his character than any words ever could. The Queen had long believed that true strength was measured by dominance and control, but she began to understand that it could also be measured by kindness, patience, and the ability to lift others without demanding anything in return. The soldier embodied these qualities, and it both intrigued and unsettled her. There were moments when the queen caught herself smiling, though she quickly hid it. She would find herself thinking about the soldier in the quiet of her chambers, wondering what he might be doing, how he might be feeling, or what he would say in response to a certain situation. She reminded herself that these thoughts were dangerous. She was a queen, and he was an outsider. Yet she could not deny that she was beginning to feel a connection that went beyond mere duty or observation. The walls she had built around herself over the years were slowly being chipped away, one thoughtful gesture, one kind word at a time. One afternoon, a minor emergency arose in the palace. A fire had broken out in a storage room, threatening supplies that were vital to the daily functioning of the household. The queen could have stayed safely in her chambers while her attendants dealt with it, but she felt compelled to observe how the soldier would respond. She watched from a distance as he assessed the situation calmly, directed the staff with clear instructions, and even carried some of the lighter items himself to prevent damage. There was no panic, no hesitation, only careful action and a determination to protect what mattered. When the fire was contained, the queen found herself feeling admiration in a way she had not expected. Here was someone who acted without seeking recognition, who remained composed under pressure, and who had the courage to step forward when others hesitated. As the days turned into weeks, the queen began allowing herself to speak to the soldier more personally. She asked about his family, his childhood, and the events that had shaped him into the man he had become. He responded openly, sharing stories of hardship, lessons learned, and moments of quiet triumph. His words were never boastful. They were honest reflections that revealed his resilience and integrity. The queen found herself drawn to these stories, finding echoes of her own struggles in his experiences. She began to see him not just as a soldier, but as a person whose life had depth, challenges, and meaning beyond his duties. Despite this growing connection, the queen maintained her caution. She reminded herself constantly that her feelings could not compromise her authority or her safety. She had seen too many relationships falter because one person had lowered their guard too quickly. She needed time, and she needed proof that the soldier's intentions were genuine. And yet she could not deny the warmth that grew in her chest whenever he was near. She could not ignore the way her heart seemed to respond to his presence, even in small, unexpected moments. A shared smile, a thoughtful gesture, or a word of encouragement when she felt uncertain. The soldier, for his part, remained consistent. He never overstepped boundaries, never sought to manipulate her feelings, and never acted in a way that would make her feel uncomfortable. He treated her with respect and dignity, but he also allowed her to see glimpses of his personality, the humor in his laugh, the care in his tone, and the sincerity in his eyes. These small moments began to build a foundation of trust. Slowly but steadily, the queen realized that she was learning to rely on him, not just for protection, but for companionship in the simplest, most human sense. One evening, the queen reflected on how much her perspective had shifted since the soldier's arrival. She had expected an outsider to be intrusive, perhaps even dangerous to her carefully managed world. Instead, she found someone who complimented her in ways she had never anticipated. He respected her authority, acknowledged her struggles without judgment, and offered support without demanding anything in return. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not just as a queen, but as a person. The experience was both liberating and unsettling. She realized that opening herself to someone else's presence was not a weakness. It could be a source of strength. The queen began to experiment with small acts of trust. She allowed the soldier to assist her in minor tasks, asked for his advice on simple matters, and even sought his opinion on decisions that had previously been made in isolation. Each time he responded with patience and thoughtfulness, never overstepping, never treating her disability as a limitation. The queen noticed how these moments gradually eased her own tension, helping her feel capable in ways she had not since the accident. She began to understand that connection was not about dependence. It was about mutual respect, understanding, and the willingness to share life's burdens and joys. By the end of the second week, the queen could not ignore the truth any longer. The soldier had become an important presence in her life, someone she could trust, someone whose actions spoke louder than words ever could. She still maintained her boundaries, still guarded her emotions, but she allowed herself to enjoy his company in ways she had not allowed anyone in years. A cautious friendship was forming, and with it, the possibility of something deeper began to take root. The queen knew that the journey ahead would require patience, understanding, and careful navigation of feelings. She was not ready to rush, nor was she willing to compromise her safety or dignity. But she also knew that the soldier had earned a place in her world, a place that no one else had been allowed in for years. And in that realization, she felt a flicker of hope, a sense that perhaps life still held surprises, and that trust, connection, and even love were not entirely beyond her reach. The peace of the kingdom was suddenly disrupted by troubling news. Scouts reported that a neighboring territory was preparing to invade, seeking to take advantage of any perceived weakness in the queen's rule. The queen had always handled threats with careful planning, relying on her experience and her advisors. Yet this situation was different. The scale of the threat required not only strategy but courage and action from those willing to put themselves in danger. For the first time since the soldier's arrival, the queen faced a challenge that would test her trust in him in a very real way. The soldier stepped forward immediately, volunteering to help organize the kingdom's defenses. He did not seek glory or recognition, only to do what was necessary to protect the people and the queen. His actions were deliberate and calm, showing a clear understanding of both strategy and human nature. He worked alongside the queen's advisors, suggesting defensive measures, training the troops, and identifying areas where the kingdom was vulnerable. The queen watched him closely, impressed by the clarity of his mind and the steadiness of his hands. Every suggestion he made was thoughtful, and every decision he took was measured. When the first signs of the invasion arrived, it became clear how critical the soldier's presence was. Scouts reported small groups of enemy soldiers moving toward the borders, and the Queen's Council debated how to respond. The Queen felt a surge of anxiety, the same fear she had experienced after her accident, but she quickly reminded herself that she was still capable of leading. She looked to the soldier for support, and he responded without hesitation. Together they coordinated the troops, ensuring that everyone knew their roles and responsibilities. The Queen could see how his presence inspired confidence in the soldiers. They trusted him, and that trust extended to her leadership as well. During the initial skirmishes, the soldier proved his courage in ways that astonished the Queen. He did not simply command from a safe distance. He moved with the troops, assessing the situation firsthand, helping those who struggled and making split-second decisions that saved lives. The Queen could feel her respect for him growing with every passing moment. Here was a person who did not merely speak of loyalty and bravery, he embodied them. She realized that his character could not be measured by words or appearances, but only by actions, especially under pressure. The Queen's advisors, who had initially been skeptical of the human soldier, began to notice the impact he had on morale. The troops listened to him, followed his instructions, and even sought his advice on difficult decisions. The Queen observed these interactions quietly, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. It was not just the soldier's skill that impressed her, it was the way he treated everyone with respect and dignity, never placing himself above others, even in moments of danger. She began to see him not only as a capable protector, but as someone whose values aligned with her own. One evening, after a particularly intense day of organizing defenses and addressing threats at the borders, the Queen found herself alone with the soldier in the council chamber. She had not planned to speak personally with him, but something compelled her to do so. She asked him about his life, about the experiences that had shaped him into the man she had come to admire. He spoke honestly, recounting moments of hardship, times when he had been afraid, and lessons learned from mistakes he had made. His words were simple yet powerful, and the Queen listened intently, realizing that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. The Queen began to reflect on her own fears, the insecurities that had taken hold since her accident. She recognized that she had allowed her disability to define her in ways that were unfair, not just to herself, but to others as well. The soldier's courage and integrity inspired her to confront these fears, to see her own strength in a new light. She realized that she could still be a leader, a protector, and a person capable of connection despite the challenges she faced. As the invasion escalated, the Queen witnessed another side of the soldier, his empathy. He attended to injured soldiers, comforted frightened civilians, and spoke with calm authority to those in distress. He did not act for recognition or reward. He acted because it was the right thing to do. The Queen noticed how his presence brought calm in the midst of chaos. Even the soldiers who had doubted him began to look to him for guidance and reassurance. The Queen felt a deep sense of gratitude, understanding that the soldier's contribution went far beyond his physical abilities. He was a source of hope and stability for everyone around him. During a critical moment in the battle, the Queen herself faced danger. A sudden attack threatened the castle gates, and the Queen's guards were struggling to hold their positions. The soldier moved quickly, assessing the situation and directing reinforcements where they were needed most. He ensured the Queen's safety without hesitation, placing himself between her and the threat when necessary. Watching him act selflessly and decisively, the Queen felt a surge of admiration and trust that went beyond professional respect. She realized that she could rely on him not just for strategy, but for protection and support in ways that mattered deeply. After the danger had passed, the Queen found herself reflecting on the events of the day. The soldier had shown courage, integrity, and compassion in ways that inspired her, not only as a leader, but as a person. She recognized that her initial skepticism had been necessary, but now she could see that he had earned a place of trust in her life. His actions had demonstrated qualities that could not be measured by rank, wealth, or power, qualities that mattered more than anything else. That night, in the quiet of her chambers, the Queen thought about the soldier in a way she had never allowed herself before. She saw him not just as a protector or advisor, but as someone whose character and presence had touched her deeply. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of hope and possibility. She realized that trust could grow even after hardship, that connection could be found even in the most unlikely circumstances, and that courage and kindness could create bonds stronger than fear or doubt. The Queen understood that this was only the beginning. The soldier had proven himself, but their relationship would require patience, care, and mutual respect. She was willing to take that step slowly and cautiously, knowing that trust could not be rushed. She allowed herself to imagine what the future might hold, not in grand or reckless ways, but in quiet, meaningful moments of understanding and companionship. By the end of the third week, the Queen's perspective had shifted significantly. She still maintained her boundaries and her independence, but she allowed herself to see the soldier as more than an outsider. He had earned her trust, inspired her courage, and awakened a sense of connection she had long thought impossible. In the face of danger, she had witnessed not only his bravery, but also his humanity. And in that realization, she began to understand that strength, loyalty, and compassion could coexist in ways that were profoundly moving. The Queen felt a subtle change within herself. She was no longer entirely defined by her fears or limitations. The soldier's presence had shown her that she could face challenges with support, that she could allow trust to grow, and that companionship was not a weakness, but a source of strength. And though the journey ahead remained uncertain, she felt ready to explore the possibilities step by step, knowing that she had found someone worthy of her trust, respect, and perhaps even her heart. Time passed, and the Queen found herself spending more moments with the soldier outside the demands of duty. Their conversations had grown longer, flowing from strategy and palace affairs to stories of childhood dreams and quiet memories. The Queen noticed how naturally he listened, never interrupting or dismissing her thoughts. It was a feeling she had long forgotten, being truly heard. She felt that he cared not only for her role as a queen, but for her as a person, and that realization began to warm her heart in ways she had not expected. Even simple activities became meaningful. They would walk in the palace gardens, the soldier moving carefully to match her pace, never rushing her. They observed the blooming flowers, talked about the seasons, and shared laughter over small observations. The queen felt at ease in his presence, a sense of comfort that was entirely new. She realized she could be herself, without putting on a facade of perfection or strength. The soldier did not see her disability as a limitation. And in that acceptance, the queen discovered a freedom she had not known since her accident. Their emotional connection deepened slowly. The queen began to share her fears and insecurities, things she had hidden from the world for years. The soldier responded with empathy and patience, never making her feel weak or judged. Each time she opened her heart a little, he offered reassurance, gently encouraging her to see her own value beyond titles or physical ability. The queen had spent so long guarding herself that this trust felt fragile, but it also felt alive, like a spark that could grow into something strong and enduring. At night, when the palace quieted, they would sit together in the council chamber or by the garden window, talking softly about hopes and possibilities. The queen found herself laughing more freely, her mood lightened by his humor and kindness. She was drawn not only to his strength and courage, but to his warmth and understanding. It was a connection built on respect, shared experience, and genuine care, a connection that neither expected but both valued deeply. Slowly, the queen began to acknowledge her feelings. She admired the soldier not just for his bravery or skill, but for who he was as a person. She realized that her initial hesitation, her reluctance to allow someone close, was rooted in fear rather than truth. The soldier had shown her that trust and companionship were not weaknesses. He respected her boundaries, supported her decisions, and celebrated her strengths, making her feel seen and valued in a way no one else had in years. The court began to notice subtle changes as well. Courtiers and advisors observed that the queen seemed more at ease, more confident, and occasionally even joyful. The soldier's calm presence and respect for her authority had not gone unnoticed, and people began to respect the bond that was forming. Yet the queen kept the nature of their connection private, understanding that it was something delicate and personal. One evening, as they watched the sun set together over the palace gardens, the queen felt a deep sense of trust and safety with him. She realized that she wanted his presence not just as a protector or advisor, but as a companion in life. The idea was both frightening and exciting. She had spent so long isolating herself that allowing someone close seemed risky. Yet with him, it felt natural, right, and safe. The queen understood that this bond was more than friendship. It was the beginning of a connection that could change her life in ways she had long thought impossible. As the days turned into weeks, their relationship continued to grow. They shared small joys, quiet conversations, and moments of understanding. The queen felt her heart opening to possibilities she had once dismissed. She saw the soldier not just as a protector or friend, but as someone who could share in her life, her joys, and her struggles. Each day together reinforced the idea that companionship and trust were not weaknesses, but sources of strength, courage, and fulfillment. By the end of this period, the queen had made a quiet but profound decision. She would allow herself to explore this connection fully, carefully, and with respect for both their boundaries. She realized that the soldier had earned not only her trust, but also her admiration and her heart. The connection between them had become a source of strength, comfort, and hope, a reminder that life could bring unexpected joy even after hardship, and that true partnership was built on respect, care, and understanding. The queen's decision to open her heart was not sudden. It was the result of weeks of careful observation, reflection, and emotional growth. She understood that her past experiences and her disability had shaped her hesitations, but she no longer allowed those fears to control her. She had learned that trust and connection were earned, and the soldier had proven himself in countless ways through courage, integrity, patience, and respect. Now she felt ready to embrace a new chapter in her life. Their bond continued to strengthen, not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through small, meaningful moments. They shared conversations in the quiet hours, supported one another in daily tasks, and celebrated achievements big and small. The queen felt a sense of companionship that went beyond the expectations of her role. She no longer faced the world entirely alone. She had someone who understood her struggles, celebrated her strengths, and respected her entirely. The soldier, too, felt a growing connection. He admired the queen's resilience, intelligence, and grace. He had seen her strength in the face of adversity, and her wisdom in guiding her people, but he also recognized the vulnerability she carried, the moments of doubt that she had hidden so well. He approached her with care, never pushing boundaries, always allowing her to set the pace of their relationship. This patience, this respect, strengthened their trust and deepened their emotional bond. Over time, the court and kingdom began to accept their closeness. The people saw how the queen's demeanor had changed, how she was more confident, composed, and even joyful. They noticed the soldier's steady presence and the way he supported her without overshadowing her authority. Their respect for the queen grew, seeing her not just as a ruler, but as someone who could form meaningful partnerships built on mutual respect. Similarly, they respected the soldier for his integrity and the honor with which he carried himself. The queen discovered that the companionship she had long avoided was not only possible but profoundly fulfilling. She realized that love, respect, and trust were not limited by physical ability, social expectations, or past experiences. She could be strong and independent while also allowing someone to share her life, her burdens, and her joys. The soldier's presence had shown her that partnership was a choice built on understanding, care, and mutual admiration. Together, they navigated both everyday life and the challenges of leadership. The soldier continued to assist when needed, not as a subordinate, but as a trusted ally and partner. They worked side by side in the palace, planning strategies, listening to the people, and making decisions that benefited the kingdom. The queen felt empowered not only by her own strength, but by the trust and support they shared. Their bond had become a source of courage, helping them both face the uncertainties of the world with confidence. In quiet moments away from the demands of the court, they continued to grow closer. They shared laughter stories and moments of silence that spoke volumes. The queen learned to trust fully, allowing herself to enjoy companionship without fear. The soldier learned the depth of her strength and the beauty of her character, appreciating her not just for what she could do, but for who she truly was. Together, they discovered a connection that was rare and meaningful, a partnership grounded in respect, trust, and genuine care. By the time peace returned to the kingdom, the queen and the soldier had formed a bond that could not be broken by circumstance or challenge. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty together, and had emerged stronger, more connected, and more understanding of one another. Their relationship became an example to the court and the people, showing that true connection is built on respect, courage, and emotional honesty. The queen felt a sense of completeness she had not known in years. She had learned that vulnerability was not weakness, that trust could be earned and cherished, and that companionship could bring strength, comfort, and joy. With the soldier by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the future might hold, confident in the knowledge that they would navigate life together. Their bond was more than friendship, more than duty. It was a partnership of equals built on respect, courage, and love. In the end, the queen realized that her journey had not been about finding someone to fill a void, but about discovering that true connection could exist when two people treated each other with respect, understanding, and care. The soldier had earned her trust, her admiration, and her heart, and together they had built a relationship that was strong, enduring, and inspiring. It was a bond that reminded them both, and everyone who witnessed it, that life could bring hope, joy, and connection.